really need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is Buffalo What's Next. I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Dave Debo.
And I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
After May 14th, how can we afford not to talk about race?
About education, about segregation, about humanity.
Since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed.
The way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops Market.
The suburban area, everywhere. We must work and teach our children.
We need to make sure that we put more funding in our programs that help prevent gun violence and more money into art.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truths.
And good morning, this is Dave Debo. On the program today, a little bit later, we're going to be talking about transportation and equity and the East Side Trail Plan. Ashley Smith from Go Bike Buffalo will be coming up in about half an hour. She'll chat with Jay Moran about some of those issues. But first, I think we really need to get into it with Bishop Michael Badger. Part of the reason why he's here today is to talk about the Grieving Families Act, pending right now with Governor Hochul waiting her signature. It's something that would change the ability to sue and the ability to get compensation for all of the families of the East Side shooting. And along the way, he's able to talk about so many different equity issues, including that, but not just that. Bishop Badger, thanks for being here.
Dave, it's a pleasure. One of my favorite stations to listen to, so I'm excited to be here.
Love that. Glad you're here. Before the program, we were talking in general about the East Side and about the conversation that needs to be had. And you crystallized it. You summarized it really well when you said, we don't need benevolence, we need investment.
Absolutely. The reason why the community looks like it does is the divestment that happened over the last 50 years. And so to change that, you need investment. You don't need benevolence takes care of an immediate need, but long term, you're still faced with the same circumstances. And so what we need in our community is those that are willing to come in and partner and recognize that there is business opportunities that can benefit everybody involved.
6 months after the shooting, are we stuck on benevolence, or is there still a need for that and the investment?
I think there's still a need for both, but I think that the latter is the most important. I think you have to change the demographics. While we need, low and medium income housing, you cannot just put poor people on top of poor people and then expect box stores and others to come just out of goodwill. They're coming because they want to make money. That's why they're in business. So in order to do that, you need the type of demographics that will support, a Wegmans or a Walgreens or some of the other box stores.
A community that has middle-class blacks, poor blacks, rich blacks will maybe still be segregated, but it will be the kind of community, you say, that would attract an Aldi's or Wegmans, what have you.
Absolutely. And there is a middle and upper middle class minority community that needs housing. Your teachers, your police officers, your firefighters, the medical corridor, where you have nurses and doctors that need places. They want to live close to where they're working. And that opportunity is not afforded right now. And we have a lot of vacant space. People just have to have the vision to see that you could really make something that will be appealing to everyone.
I don't want to parse your words, but let me probe more into this idea of benevolence versus investment. Yeah. Is there a lack of investment because there is a lack of benevolence? Is it intrinsic racism that people are not necessarily aware of? Or is it truly a lack of benevolence? Is it ill thoughts? Is it bad feelings?
Well, I think there might be some of that, but I think a lot of it just is ignorance. Not understanding, the plight of what has happened in East Buffalo or the East Side, however you want to phrase that, and recognizing that it didn't get there by itself.
Yeah.
It got there because intentionally you put a throughway through the middle of it and ruined a beautiful park, Olmsted Park there. You took away a lot of the opportunities, and so when you had Bethlehem Steel and Republic Steel and Chevy and all of those places go, and then there was no investment made to ensure that housing and other things were kept up, this is what you get. You get the third poorest city in the country. It wasn't always that way. It happened through a series of events. Now, whether that was intentional, I'm not prepared to say that it was intentional.
The intent of the Kensington was to connect two
yes,
areas.
That was intentional.
Without awareness of the fact they were splitting a neighborhood, or was it just a matter of we don't care? The throughway needs to go
I think
here?
in that case we don't care.
Yeah.
Because we're going to make it easy to get in and out of the city to our jobs. And here's the interesting thing, the investments that were made. Amherst didn't get to be Amherst because people were smarter. They got to be Amherst because you decided to take the University of Buffalo and build it out there, and build all the infrastructure with tax dollars to make that happen. Had UB been built downtown like it was supposed to, we're talking about a totally different city. Had the stadium or the rapid transit had not just been down Main Street like it and went to other places, there were so many mistakes that were made because a couple of individuals decided what was going to be best for them and didn't look at the whole of this community.
Let me pick on one of those examples. Is it bad that the new Buffalo Bills stadium is going to be in Orchard Park?
I think it's unfortunate. I understand to some degree why it's being put out there, but for me, as a person that grew up in Buffalo, it was always a hope and a dream that once again, I remember War Memorial Stadium.
Sure.
I lived on Johnson Street where people would park and go to the stadium. I would have loved to seen a stadium in the city. Now, whether that was financially prohibitive because of, eminent domain issues and other things, that the infrastructure that would cost maybe $750 million more, and it became financially prohibitive, I get it. I get it. But for my druthers, I would have loved to have seen it in the city of Buffalo.
Bishop Michael Badger is here from the Bethesda World Harvest International Church.
Yes.
Right there on Main Street in Utica. We're talking a little bit about investment on the east side. We will, before the program's done, also touch on the Grieving Families Act pending before Governor Hochul. You are in an interesting position. You have the facility there on Main Street near Utica. You're talking about investment, and to a large degree, you have put your money where your mouth is. You are a landlord for retail business along Main Street.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dave. When I came back to Buffalo from Charlotte in January of 1990, it's been 32 years, our church, which was the old Regency Theater, historically, a little bit of information, the last silent movie was played at that theater. So it was an old building that looked like it should have been condemned. And we put $3.5 million into that building, revitalized it, changed it. And then the building next door to us that would take us to East Utica was in disrepair. We talked to the owner of it. He sold it to us. And we redid that building. And now we're putting some affordable apartments upstairs. We've got commercial space downstairs. So altogether, we've invested over $5 million on that main East Utica Square area right there.
Is it easy for businesses to set up shop? Even and everyone says Jefferson, but let's look at that that desolate stretch of Main Street. Is it easy for businesses to set up shop there?
I think there's an opportunity for business, but it has its challenges because of, you're looking at the busiest subway station in the city right there at Main and Utica, and there's a lot of traffic that happens there, and we have some challenges because of drug treatment centers and different things like that. But I still think that there's great opportunity for business right there because of the amount of people that visit that area every day.
I think of the first President George Bush and his whole idea of 1,000 points of light. The idea was that volunteer groups and faith groups and people out there make those 1,000 points of light, that it didn't necessarily have to be government. That's kind of what you're doing with the church, isn't it?
Absolutely. I believe that the true gospel has to impact outside of the four walls, or what does it mean to the community? If you're talking about reaching out and making a difference, if it's just in the four walls, then why are you necessary? I think you have to be able to impact outside of the four walls of the church to really be what Jesus preached and taught.
Does that absolve the government for not doing enough?
No, the government must play its part. Let's face it, we don't have the type of dollars that government has. But I think government shouldn't exclude faith-based organizations from being a part, because those are we pay taxes too. And so,
wait a minute, churches don't pay taxes.
Churches don't, but the people in them do.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So and then the mission that we do of feeding, of clothing, of like this. Right now, my wife and I'm making this announcement, but our upstairs, our multi-purpose room is filled with toys. I mean, literally filled from top to bottom with toys that we'll give away to hundreds of families in the next 2 weeks. So, those are things that we do every year. We, during Thanksgiving, we feed families. We have Coke giveaways. All of that. We spend our own money to do that, as well as we work with other groups to do that. All of that happens because there is a mission that says, we need to be our brother's keeper.
And I think in all the analysis of the things that have happened since the shootings on 5/14, there's been a lot of discussion about the tight-knit nature of the East Side. The fact that there is, not that the church isn't part of it, but the fact that there is a pre-existing strong sense of community.
Yeah, well, Buffalo is a big family. I guarantee you that when you meet someone, if you talk long enough, somebody that they know, or their kin. When we look at those the Buffalo 10 that lost their lives, I remember Miss Whitfield. Garnell and Robin and I went to School 90 together, Genesee Humble together. We were childhood friends, and I remember Miss Whitfield as being one of the mothers of the community. And when we were growing up, people like Miss Whitfield would correct you. Say, "Boy, you better stop doing that. You get away from that." You know what I'm saying? They took ownership of the fact that we were all their children.
And in your congregation, there are a lot of people that knew the 10.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody knew somebody.
Yeah.
Or had family that were a part of that. Yeah.
How's the community doing? Is there still grief, or I go back to your earlier premise, now is the time for benevolence, investment rather than benevolence.
Yeah.
Do we still have people who are grieving and suffering and hurting?
I would definitely say to the families that lost loved ones, and to even those that saw that, absolutely, there is still the process of grief that is happening. I think for many people, there is now the issue. Okay, what is going to happen out of this that will make this tragedy turn into some type of triumph?
People you think are ready to turn that corner?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I think that needs to happen in order to give some sense that this was just, that people didn't just senselessly lose their life and nothing positive came out of it.
All right. When we return, we're going to talk a little bit more about those families, about some of the grief in the community. Bishop Michael Badger is here from Bethesda World Harvest International Church. He's one of the people that has spoke out recently about the Grieving Families Act. It's on Governor Hochul's desk right now. It has been approved by the State Assembly and the State Senate. It would change a lot, and we'll get into that when we return. This is Buffalo What's Next on WBFO.
There are a lot of great ways to spend $8 a month and get a blue check mark. So why not become a member of WBFO, your NPR station? You'll be a verified member on the spot, and your money will support high-quality news and information. For fun, we'll send you a snazzy window cling and a travel mug, both with our logo and the blue check mark that shows everyone you're a verified member of WBFO. Just call 1-877-456-8870 or go to WBFO.org to make your pledge. Thank you.
Not sure what you want to watch tonight? We've got you covered. Visit WNED.org/TV schedule to see what's on WNED PBS, WNED Create, and WNED PBS Kids. Click the Primetime button to see what's on tonight. You can also search for your favorite programs in the search bar or look for programs by date and time. Visit WNED.org/TV schedule and start making your viewing plans now.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter @WBFO or email us at news@WBFO.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And coming up in just a bit, we'll hear from the people at Go Bike Buffalo. But first, continuing our discussion with Bishop Michael Badger from the Bethesda World Harvest International Church, Maine and roughly Utica area. Someone who has been immersed in the community and talking a lot about what the community needs, what the grieving families need. Let's get into the whole idea of this Grieving Families Act. It's been approved by the Senate. It's been approved by the Assembly. It's awaiting the signature from Governor Hochul. It would do a bunch of different things to change the litigation system. There are about 47 other states where people are allowed to include grief in the financial compensation after a death in the courts. It is the case in about 47 other states where people are allowed to include domestic partners as someone who has lost a loved one if they take this kind of situation to court for compensation. Why do you think that is, above all, an equity issue? I want to read a quote. You had a news conference with Crystal Peoples-Stokes, the Assembly minority leader, and majority leader rather, and you said, "We have the opportunity to update a wrongful death law that was written at a time when my life and the life of any black person, woman, or person of color was not considered equal." For you, this is a historical thing. This goes back to antebellum for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's a very antiquated law that happened in the 1800s. And basically, the law only awards you according to your ability to earn a living, whatever your economic status was. And you would think for a progressive state like New York that we wouldn't be stuck back in the 1800s with a law like this. It doesn't take into effect the type of loss and the type of pain that happens when you lose a loved one, and not just emotionally, but economically. If that person is a senior, now I'm a mature adult now.
You and me both.
And if, I was to lose my wife, it has an impact because a lot of the things that she does for me that don't necessarily, I can't quantitate financially, but yet it does impact things in my life. To say that because she is not earning money that it doesn't impact me, both emotionally and financially.
And yet, if we look at pure economics, out of the 10, the youngest was Roberta Drury at 32. But there were 6 of the victims over age 60. Ruth Whitfield, we spoke of her earlier, 86 years old.
Right.
If we're doing an analysis of Ruth's value on this earth and basing it purely on future earning power, at age 86, she's not worth as much.
That's right. And who should determine that for this family? You know, how can you tell me that my mother's worth is less than someone else's because of her ability to earn a living? And so we're putting a dollar amount on what people's economic status is. And I can't believe in New York State that that's still an issue.
The attorneys and legal groups that are arguing against this bill, or at least perhaps encouraging Governor Hochul not to sign it, have said it'll result in huge settlements, that it will in some cases break the bank, as it were. How do you respond?
Well, you got 47 other states, as you mentioned, and it's not breaking their bank.
Okay.
And it seems to me that because of strong lobbyists, and this was passed by the Assembly, and both houses, and so why are we still in a situation where we haven't gotten this signed yet by the governor? And the bottom line is you've got big interests, special interests, that have put a lot of pressure on the governor not to sign this bill.
Can you name names? I don't want to press you, but what groups are pushing back?
Well, I think insurance companies, would push back on it. I think, your medical institutions would push back on this. Any large corporations that could be held liable for that type of award, I think would push back on it.
I have heard that I've talked to attorneys representing family members, and many of them obviously are contemplating lawsuits, preparing lawsuits, but said they really don't want to file them yet until they know what's happening with this law.
Right. Well, in order to, and I know John Elmore, I've talked with John, who's representing a couple of the families. He says, Bishop, it's going to cost me upwards over $1 million to represent this family. To invest that kind of money, you need to be able to ensure that it's worth the investment. And right now, because of the way the laws have been written, for many of these people that are seniors and have surpassed their significant earning years, this law says that your life is not worth as much.
The other part of it that is worth note, grieving families. It changes the definition of a family member.
Yes. Well, and family has changed in society over the years. Who am I to determine who your family should be or how you define family? I think that's up to every individual to define that.
I don't want to take issue with you, but I'm surprised to hear a minister go there, because in so many cases, the issue of who you love, who you define as your family member, is sometimes in conflict with religious belief.
Yeah, that's true. But here again, one of the things that I believe about the gospel is that here's what God says. He says, I set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. You choose. God always gives us the opportunity to choose. And so who am I to take away the choice of people? I think you have the right to choose who you want to love, but I don't think you can impose your beliefs on me the same way I don't want to impose my beliefs on you.
All right. Bishop Michael Badger is with us from Bethesda World Harvest International Church. Remaining 5 minutes or so here, and I almost don't want to ask this question because I think in your case the faith is self-evident, but are you optimistic? Do you think that when you look at the scope of all the things that need to be decided and improved on the east side, that there's a chance that those things would happen? Are you optimistic?
I have to be. I think the challenge that the East Side faces is a leadership challenge. I think for too often we've looked to our politicians to be our leaders. I think by its very nature, politicians play a role that have to compromise. That's the very nature of it. I think we need more independent voices in our community that will speak truth to power and be uncompromising in what needs to happen. And so I'm hoping that through entrepreneurship and that gives people an independent voice. Too much of our community is dependent upon government, upon the public dollars, and it limits your ability to have an independent voice.
We talked earlier about the nature of the community, the idea that, yes, it is tight-knit, that everybody knows everyone. Mm-hmm. But there are people involved in urban planning that say, yeah, there's a sense of community, but the institutions or the structure or the organizations that really help support a community aren't necessarily there. And if we're only turning toward government to be those community builders, we're falling short. Sounds like you'd agree.
Well, I think that the church in our community has to be the mainstay. It has always been that, and I think that government has to realize that the one institution that has the infrastructure necessary to bring about change is the church. So you cannot say that because this is a non-for-profit or a religious organization that we don't want to work with you, because many times they have the infrastructure necessary to do housing, to create opportunities. You know what I'm saying? So I think that we have to, I think the east side of Buffalo is much different. The role of a pastor on the east side is much different than it is in Amherst. My colleagues in Amherst can just preach on Sunday. I am, a counselor, an accountant, an attorney. You play many different roles in a sense because of the needs of that community.
And your contention is those needs are greater.
Those needs are greater because they have no other place to turn to.
How much of a role does a church group, as you've described it, play in desegregation? There's the famous Martin Luther King quote that it is the most that Sunday morning at 10 a.m. is the most segregated hour on the planet, because there are black churches and white churches. How do you get over that diversity divide?
Well, I think when you go to many of the suburban churches, you will see black families in there. But I think it's very challenging to see white families in black churches. Yeah. And I do have several but I think it's more of a challenge to be under black leadership because that's not the norm. That's not how people were brought up.
Interesting. I didn't think of it that way, but you're looking at it truly culturally.
Absolutely. Yeah, culture it means how we live, right?
Now, see, I was approaching it primarily in my mind as a geographic thing. Mm-hmm. I live near here, therefore I go to the church that's near here. And that the segregation of the community, therefore, informs the segregation of the population of the congregation. No. You're taking it further.
Yeah, well, most of the parishioners in my church don't live in the community, don't live in that neighborhood. They come from all over.
Okay.
I've had members come from Canada. You see what I'm saying, to the church. So the community church, I don't think is something that you necessarily see in most churches. They're coming from all over. And like I said, I know many black families that go to the chapel and other places, outside of the community because they feel that that's where their need is being met. I'd like to see that same type of reciprocation.
29 minutes and we didn't even touch on education.
I know, right?
Bishop Badger, we have to have you back.
I'd love to come back.
We'll talk more about education at some other time. Michael Badger, Bishop Michael Badger, Bethesda World Harvest International Church right there on Main near Utica. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you, Dave, for inviting me.
Coming up next, Jay Moran with Go Bike Buffalo. This is WBFO.
When you meet with your trusted advisors to review your estate plan, please consider asking them to name Buffalo Toronto Public Media as a beneficiary in your will, trust, insurance policy, or retirement account. Your gift will ensure the voice of public radio continues for generations to come. For more information, visit WNED.org/legacy or contact Colleen Miller at cmiller@WNED.org. Thank you.
Get all the trusted local news you need right to your inbox each weekday morning with the WBFO Daily Email. Visit WBFO.org to sign up today.
Our region is home to some of the finest communities in the world. Explore them through the Our Town series produced by WNED PBS, but captured by community members on the Buffalo Toronto Public Media YouTube channel today.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter @WBFO or email us at news@WBFO.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And welcome back to Buffalo What's Next. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Interested in the topic that we have coming up here. We're going to talk about a very significant grant that's coming to Buffalo. It's going to benefit the East Side in a very specific way. Let me introduce our guest. We have Stephanie Simeon. She is the Executive Director of Heart of the City Neighborhoods. Thanks, Stephanie, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And also Ashley Smith, Go Bike Buffalo. Ashley is the Deputy Director. Hi, Ashley.
Thank you, Jay.
All right, so thanks for coming in. And what we're getting into here now is this NYSERDA grant. And I know that's we're kind of getting off here, but the point of it is the East Side Trails Project. Now, this is something I love trails. It's one of the things I love about Western New York. They're emerging everywhere. I didn't know anything about the East Side Trails Project. Who wants to explain, give me an overview here?
Sure. I'll jump in, Jay, just to say that the East Side Trails process, we've done a lot of work so far to try to keep that as close to the community as possible. So this is in some ways, this conversation widening that loop for everyone. But we've been focused on making sure that the neighbors that are most impacted and closest to these potential trail facilities are the neighbors that we're focused on engaging so far. These projects would extend the existing Scajaquada Corridor Trail, which meets Main Street near the Delavan Station, and the footbridge that crosses 33. If people are familiar with that, it would include that trail that does exist today and is under City of Buffalo ownership and Parks control.
Is that the Gator Parkway?
That is not.
Oh, okay.
So that's where the Scajaquada Corridor is buried, actually below there.
Okay.
And then we're looking for on-road connections to connect that facility with revamped and overhauled with an extended William Gator Parkway.
I see.
So William Gator Parkway has an existing side path, but it lacks a lot of amenities, and there's the opportunity to connect that with the North Buffalo Rail Trail to form a greater connection and make sure that the communities within the East Side are able to access all of these facilities that exist more broadly have to offer.
Let me turn that then to Stephanie, and she can explain this better than I. So then we're talking about a rail project or a project of this sort on the East Side. At the same time, your focus at Heart of the City Neighborhoods is housing.
Yes, affordable housing. And when you look at affordable housing, you want to look at what amenities a person can have outside of the built environment. And so to my colleague's point here, we're looking at joining communities. So I believe, and I'm geographically challenged, but we're looking at joining Lovejoy, Maston, and University District through these trails and then connecting it to a much larger trail towards the Scajaquada.
And let's throw in Hamlin Park also. I don't want to miss our neighbors there. Yes. We've also had the Trinidad Block Club and some of their community engaged as well.
So one of the things that you look at when you're joining these communities is what do they have in common? And they have very old housing stock. Hamlin Park does have the benefit of having a significantly strong, engaged community block club. And so we wanted to make sure we partner with them to say that as we bring on these trails, as we enhance the way that you use your community, we want to make sure that the neighborhood becomes primed for other resources. And so we wanted to make sure that we dealt with the main concern that came out of all of the community engagement, which was gentrification. And for
Right.
many people, that's a big G word, but as an urban planner, there is a way to make sure that the neighborhood has an equitable plan in place to make sure that when private investment does decide to come in, the neighborhood is ready where they're not spectated upon. And so that's why we wanted to make sure that if we're joining these really unique old communities, historically African American communities, we wanted to make sure that as we work on ways to enhance it through these trails, that nothing was going to be taken away.
Sure. And the gentrification issue is obviously huge. At the
Yeah.
same time, I just want to make sure, though, or get some perspective on this. If, and we'll even say when
Yeah.
this project is complete, do we have an understanding that that is going to increase private investment into neighborhoods? Is that something that follows?
Yeah, Jay, this isn't a stat that I have with me this morning, but we've seen the country over rails to trail conversion. We were talking earlier about the fact that this will use some former railroad right-of-way. They are often a harbinger for an increase in property values, and it really makes sense when you think about the resource that these facilities can be for a community and a neighborhood. They certainly attract investment. People enjoy them. It creates a space that people can go, can gather, can walk, clear their head, and that's absolutely what you want in your neighborhood and what you want in your community. And so as soon as you see these facilities in in the neighborhoods and in the community, we expect to see people want to live there, and that's going to come with some increased attention. And we want to make sure the people that are living there now are the people who get to benefit from these facilities.
Right. And so one of the things that we were thinking of is tying it with doing an owner-occupied rehab. So working with the folks that already own their homes in these neighborhoods that are in proximity to the trails, and then providing them with small grants to do the repairs. So that if a spectator would come by, they wouldn't say, well, let me just offer you $40,000 for your house that we consider to be in disrepair, and then someone is enticed by that. We're going to say, no, we're going to give you that money to do the roof, the windows, doors, whatever's needed so that you can maximize the life of that home that you're in, and then still be able to benefit from the equity that's going to be built from that rehab.
I don't want to get off the topic too
Yep.
much, but since I have you here, that is an issue right now already in the east side of Buffalo.
Yeah.
That people are coming. Will we buy houses for cash?
Mm-hmm. It's all over. You can see the signs on every little thing, on the electric pole. It's like, we buy your house for cash. What we've done at Heart of the City, we've been able to make sure that we have a proactive approach. And the best approach was to support owner-occupied units with rehab assistance up to $40,000. And we've noticed that doesn't take away gentrification, but it definitely has the spectator. They're going to have to come up with a higher price.
Gotcha.
And they're not willing to do that.
All right. And then to add to that, or just to build on the idea, then for you, the homeowner who's thinking, oh boy, it'd be nice to get some cash, hold on, because a major improvement is coming to your neighborhood here, right? In terms of this trail project. What would it be? Let's talk about then the benefits for the residents. How, like I said, I have my own, I guess, inert love for these types of things. It sounds great to me. What a great place to walk, great place to ride my bike.
Right.
But what benefits, what's going to be the benefit beyond home ownership and home value? What's going to be the benefit to the neighborhoods?
Yeah, the benefit will be that people have a safe alternative to our current city street network.
Are the current city streets unsafe?
Yes, I would absolutely say, coming from Go Bike and from our perspective, city streets are not safe enough. We issued a report earlier this year showing crash and injury rates across the city network to be able to highlight areas that are more dangerous than others. And you'll see some of the roadways in these communities are among the most dangerous in the city. So it's really absolutely critical that people have an alternative. For Go Bike, we want to see people, no matter what mode they choose, and knowing, especially in Buffalo with our median income, that sometimes a personal automobile is not what you can spring for to afford. So we need to see transportation facilities and networks that can give people dignity no matter what mode they're choosing. So if you walk, if you take the bus, if you take your bike, and maybe you combine these in order to get where you need to go. These facilities, both legs of it connect with transit stations. The William Gator Parkway extension component of this would connect at LaSalle Station, which is also poised for some redevelopment currently. And so there's a lot of opportunities for what this could connect to there, what kinds of resources could be available on site, and just a short bike ride or walk away from most of these neighborhoods, and a safe one now with these facilities. And the Skajackwada leg connects again at Delavan in Maine, where that train station is as well. The Delavan route is a popular bus route. So the potential for interconnectivity here is also really critical, and a key component of where Go Bike and Heart of the City neighborhoods are partners on this going forward.
Absolutely.
And just as a little bit of a disclaimer, we should note that Ashley rode her bike in today on this rainy day.
Yes, she did.
Yes, it's really where I can share with people who are listening this morning. It's quite pleasant once you have the appropriate wear. The Dutch have a great saying, there's no bad weather, only bad clothing. So.
Very nice, very nice. With us this morning, Ashley Smith and also Stephanie Simeon. What about the neighborhoods right now in terms of what this project could mean, but where they are right now? What are these neighborhoods lacking?
Yeah, so, we like to look at it from an asset-based community development approach. And so I think, people who pay attention and who are your readers, they already know what some things are missing. So, we want to use this opportunity to talk about the things that they have. We have a strong community. We have people who have gone through so many pandemics before COVID.
Sure.
We've had people who have gone through the crack cocaine pandemic. We have gone through so much. And now we have people who are saying, I want to live here. They choose to live here. We don't have to market the neighborhood. They want to live there. There are a burgeoning entrepreneur community coming in. People are taking advantage of what would look like missing teeth. So these vacant housing, we have the vacant structures. We're looking at people who are partnering in land trusts. We're looking at folks who are doing gardening, urban agriculture. So there's a lot happening in the East Side. And so we just want to be able to use the resources that we've been able to come in, which is a very competitive grant, to just 10x the way people are living and the way people have experience the East Side, and help them with branding and help them say, no, you can do this and this is available. And we want to make sure that we prime the neighborhood for those kind of resources and make sure that it's culturally appropriate as we do that.
I apologize, Ashley, but when you were talking, you brought up about 7 different issues that we could have probably gotten into in other shows, but we'll hold off on that. I'm sorry, Ashley.
No, I just want to jump in to fill that in a little bit and offer just a couple of names for partners that we've been working with. As Stephanie's saying, there's such a large base that we're working with. We've had the pleasure through this East Side Trails project of connecting with the Northland Beltline Taxpayers Association, the Norfolk Avenue Block Club, Hamlin Park Community and Taxpayers Association, with the Restore Our Community Coalition, Trinidad Neighborhood Association, Mount Olive Baptist Church and their Development Corporation. I may be missing the Del Grider Community Center. There's so many organizations doing great work across these communities, and we're really stepping in and looking to work with them. And a lot of, I think, the process so far has been getting to know, connecting with the visions that they all have, and being able to really incorporate and lift that vision. Thinking also in that context about the Fillmore Square Garden and the work that Rita Gay has been doing there for years. They have a strong vision for what can be happening on Fillmore Avenue, and this is a space where we are able to connect some resources to that as a broader picture.
And it's interesting you bring up community engagement. We did talk about this just a little bit before we went on the air, and it seems like you're very sensitive to the idea that you want to use this as an opportunity to connect these neighborhoods to improve, perhaps, I guess it's always depending on your opinion, of improve neighborhoods, but you don't want to be mandating to neighborhoods. What about that, though, in terms of, we touched upon this a little bit before, getting people to be involved right now at this stage of history, not only in terms of the world, but in terms of Buffalo and East Buffalo since May 14th?
Yeah. Since May 14th, it's been really difficult for for people to come in groups. We already had to deal with the fact that we weren't able to do that. We had to safely distance because of the pandemic and health concerns. Many of the communities that Ashley and I are working with daily are largely senior communities. So we also have to be very understanding that they may have existing health conditions, and so that would have made it really difficult for them to meet together anyway.
Sure.
Then you add in the massacre that happened, which said to people, it kind of went in their minds that we're not safe.
Even in the safest places.
In the safest, nationwide, we're noticing that people aren't safe in places of worship. And this is beyond just, these are multiple religions that are having trouble with keeping their people safe in those spaces. The children aren't safe in schools. So in many cases, where are people supposed to go? And so this is why, as we're working together here, we're saying, okay, you know what? We can't do a lot about that. A lot of these things are beyond our control. But if we can make your walk down the street safe, where we can deal with, the distressed communities, the socioeconomic status that is known, nationwide for Buffalo, the poverty status. We can't do a lot about that. But if we can make your walk around your neighborhood, if your kids can play across the street, if they can go to a place that is safe, if we can do something with the lighting, if we can make sure that we work with the city to provide you with curbs and safe streets and safe walks, then we've done something. We have done something to allow someone to have a better quality of life. Because right now, when we're trying to meet with people, we have to do things virtually.
Okay.
People still just do not feel safe meeting in large gatherings. And I think churches across Buffalo will have the same concern. There's a huge decline in people coming together for that. They just don't feel safe.
So, like you said, Ashley, earlier, that this kind of is trying to get the word out a little bit more expansively about this project. What are the steps that are going to be taken to then get that word out to all of these locales? And then, as Stephanie was talking about here, bringing everybody together. I mean, what's the engagement process moving forward?
Yeah, moving forward, as we take a breather for the holiday season and then come back early next year, we'll have a public meeting on the calendar. Once we head into January, and that will be our next broader public interface. So we'll be working together to make sure that there are multiple access points for that. Limiting barriers, as Stephanie's saying, is a huge part of this for us, and just reducing barriers to access also for people within the infrastructure in their communities.
What about when you talk about barriers? Let's talk about the barriers that might exist. We want to be optimistic about this happening. What are the barriers that could keep this from happening? Mm-hmm. What do we see in terms of opposition to these types of programs? I mean, because from my perspective, just one man's opinion, looks great to me.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say with this Nicer to Clean Neighborhoods Challenge award to LISC New York, this secures most of the funding that we need in order to complete these projects. So funding is typically a large barrier that you have to cross. And that's one that I'm really excited to say for this audience that we've crossed. What comes next is, as Stephanie's mentioned, making sure that we're addressing the concerns that are the most prevalent in the community, and making sure that we're meeting those needs first. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's a critical barrier for us to cross in implementing this project, is making sure that we have heard, loud and clear from the neighborhoods that are the most directly impacted what they need to see in order for this to be a success. Because even if we have the funding to build them, if we can't build them to the neighborhood specifications, it's not a successful project. In terms of broader opposition to these projects, there are some that question whether or not this is the most important investment that we could make with these dollars. And to that, I would say, in response, the same things that I'd said so far, which is that this is a really critical transportation connection for Go Bike, for the vision that we see for the future, where people have more mobility options, have options for healthier lifestyles, and have options for less costly transportation choices. This kind of facility is absolutely critical. It's a critical component of building a network, and network is what has to happen for this to be realistic. And then another logistical hurdle that we will have to cross is right-of-way for this. Yeah. So some of it is former railroad corridor, but some of it we will have to acquire. And so that will be a challenge going forward. But again, the fact that we are resourced to be able to do this work makes that a hurdle that I'm sure that we will cross.
Just how much, when we talk about the railway right-of-ways, how much space are we talking about in the city of Buffalo? I'm familiar with some of it, but is there really that much that could help this project?
Yeah, so the East Side Trails project itself is about 3 miles total, including on and off-road connections. So we're only looking at, a couple of miles of right-of-way to assemble for this project. But this is just the start. There are plenty of other potential connections. I encourage listeners, if you're interested in trails projects, to, head over to gobikebuffalo.org and see more of what we're working on. We do expect to see what other linkages can be coming. Buffalo was built at a time, I mentioned earlier, with, we have sidewalks. We have a great, historic street grid to work from. We need to make it safer and we need to slow traffic down. But we also have a lot of rail corridors that are linked in to key points in our city. I don't know much about what's happening currently with Central Terminal, but that's another great example of, infrastructure that's there that can be reactivated and utilized. And so some of these former rail corridors can become, the new artery of our transportation system.
Another example of our history could be our future here in Buffalo.
Absolutely.
Ashley Smith and Stephanie Simeon with us here for the next 10 minutes on What's Next Buffalo. Stephanie, what about when you talk to perhaps people that you deal with at your organization, when you talk about, throw this idea out there, and again, maybe we're kind of at the beginning stages of making this all a reality, but
Right.
what are some of the initial reactions to, we're going to have a pathway going through the east side?
So one of the things I just wanted to add in, what Ashley beautifully said, is that when you talked about barrier, one of the barriers is the paradigm shift. There is a lot of research out there, and I'm pretty sure that it's, just from a typical Google search, you can see it, how people of color interact with green space. And there is some challenges around how people interact with or what they're giving access to.
Okay.
So when we talk of, when you look at, this is me with my housing hat on.
Sure.
When you look at what created red line communities, right? Historically, it wasn't, sort of a black issue. It was mostly certain Europeans that they considered they didn't want in their neighborhood, so they redlined those communities and created barriers for them to be able to be green line communities. When you look at, you separate Buffalo and you see how people are allowed to interact with space, with green space, it is a completely different when you look at like an MLK Park area as opposed to an Elmwood Village. Completely different, where you have Bidwell, right? Bidwell Parkway, where people can use this green space any way that they like. And then on certain days of the week, there's a farmer's market. You can play, you can do whatever you want to do. You have access to these trees, this fresh air. You have these things. There was a Bidwell in the east side. It was now the 33 Expressway. So when we're looking at telling people we're going to have these trails, we're going to have this access, you're going to be able to do these things, we have to deal with the cultural sensitivity issue of how are we have allowed you as a community to interact with green space. So the first thing you're going to come up with is fear. Well, what's happening when I'm on this trail?
Right.
Well, is somebody going to, is somebody out there, if is it not lit? What's going on? Is, what are these kind of things? And so you're going to, you have an already traumatized community now dealing with something where some people would say that would be lovely. I would take my kids for a walk. I would take my bike. For me, because I don't bike, I would take a nice walk or a light run or jog. But I also live near Delaware Park, right? So that would be a different experience from someone that lives on Bach Street. Where there is, within a 5-mile radius, there is no green space.
Right.
So that idea of what do you do when you have a trailway, most folks are not going to know what to do. So how do people respond when they have a fear? It's just that they're going to push it away. They're going to say, we don't need this in our neighborhood. This is a bad idea. We don't want it. So we're going to come up with some community feedback just because we have a community that has said certain people, based on the zip codes that they are born in, are not allowed to have access to green space. So that's what we're going to have. What we're going to have to do as community-based organizations is then walk people through. So with Go Bike, we had an opportunity with the Delavan, the bike path by the Scajaquada. We just go out there with you. Mm-hmm. We're gonna walk there with you. We're gonna get on our bikes and we're gonna do that. And then when you come back, we're gonna feed you real good food. Because this is a community. We love our good food, New Yorkers, right? So we have to figure out ways to kind of baby steps people and say,
sure. You're anticipating that.
Yes. Okay. We know for sure that is going to happen. And I also know from personal experience, even though I'm, originally from Brooklyn, New York, I didn't have as much exposure to the green space until I came to Buffalo, and I lived in this neighborhood where I'm down the block from the Buffalo Zoo and that kind of thing. It was very foreign to me to be in that space, and I didn't feel always welcome. That's why you don't hear people saying it. When you look at the pictures of people going to Central Park and these other places, they do not look like me. And so we have to tell people that is a right. That is a human right for you to have access to these things. And here's a great way for you to be able to access these things. And that's why we want to join these communities together through these trails. So there's a lot of work that's going to be happening behind the scenes, but we're going to walk the community through and say, we're going to do everything we can to use this as leverage. Because once we can tell people how to maximize the life in their community and improve their quality of life, other resources will come for the housing, for the access to healthy foods, for better education opportunities for our kids. It will happen. We just have to start in a place that is palpable to the larger funders.
So, Ashley, you're going to reach out, you're going to get input from neighborhoods, but at the same time, as Stephanie just kind of alluded to, there's going to be baby steps. What are some of the things that you're going up as a person who's involved in policy? What are some of the benefits that you're going to be highlighting and trying to assure people that this is going to work out well for their neighborhoods?
Sure. We mentioned before, this is all public health related for us. Go Bike is a public health-based organization. This provides an immediate opportunity to get people out walking more. The Surgeon General recommends 30 minutes of walking per day, and many of our trips are less than a mile. So a lot of our trips, if the infrastructure is supportive, can be walkable. And so the benefits, again, it relates to our health. It means that we will be healthier, happier, our mental wellness will improve. All of these have, direct relationship to having access to facilities like this, to having safer sidewalks, safer crossings. The business benefits of this come additionally. I come from a Main Streets program background and economic development. I've seen some of the recent work that the Jefferson Avenue Business Association is doing. There are plenty of other organizations, again, around the city that are waiting for the infrastructure to be there to be supportive. Stephanie mentioned redlining. We have a history of disinvestment in these communities. And again, not focusing on the deficits that are there. All of these organizations, businesses are ready and waiting for that investment. And when we see this investment come through, we see the infrastructure improved. The benefits are so much greater reaching than I can describe in some of those simple stats.
We have less than 2 minutes remaining, but I want to get two pieces of information from you, Ashley, before I finish up with Stephanie. First and foremost, a projected date that this could be completed, and again, the website where people can find out more.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of a projected date, we're looking at least 3 to 4 years before we would have a project complete. We're getting ready to work, in earnest, coming back from the holiday season to get more public engagement into this process. So the work that we're doing currently, we're wrapping up a feasibility study effort, and we're expecting now, knowing that funding is coming, to roll that directly into additional design work, engineering, and eventually construction. And so from that, again, it's about 3 years. We have to assemble some of that right of way. There's quite a bit of technical work that needs to be done in order for these facilities to be real. We're excited to be aligned with some of the goals of the City of Buffalo Parks Master Plan that has also acknowledged that there is a deficit of resources in these communities. And we'll have to be working with the City of Buffalo closely, the Buffalo Police Department closely. And for people to find out more information, they can go to eastsidetrails.org or go to gobikebuffalo.org and into our projects list.
No pressure, Stephanie, but 20 seconds. Are you optimistic?
I am. I'm a hopeless optimist. Buffalo is stronger. We are stronger together. And just look at us together here today and seeing what kind of resources we can bring to Buffalo. I doubt it. I don't have a doubt in my bone. A doubt in my body. Yeah.
Stephanie Simeon is the Executive Director of Heart of the City Neighborhoods, and Ashley Smith is the Deputy Director of Go Bike Buffalo. We've enjoyed having you talking about this project, and hopefully we can talk about it some more in depth as we move forward. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Shay.
This is Buffalo What's Next on WBFO, WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown, your NPR station.